Hi, I'm Maris. My brother once threw cake at me while I was coding the AI that saved our family business. At the launch party, he called me the assistant, and everyone clapped. But that wasn't the worst part. It was the way they erased me, slowly, in boardrooms, on documents, from photos where I was cropped out, right before my name tag. I built the backbone of our company while they planned photo ops, and the moment they took credit was the moment I started taking everything back. Ever been written out of your own story? It was a Thursday morning in South Lake Union. The sun was still low, casting long, polite shadows across the co-working space we'd borrowed for our product demo. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fresh carpet glue. I'd arrived early, as always. My laptop was already open, code streaming down the screen like rainfall. I was tightening the back-end predictive model for one final run. Torin breezed in just before the investors. His laugh arrived first, bouncing off the glass walls before he did. Always too loud. Always timed like a stage cue. "Morning, little sis," he called out, slapping a paper plate onto the counter. "Look what I brought." I glanced up. Cake. Red velvet. His favorite. "We still celebrating?" I asked without turning. "Joint birthday week, remember?" He grinned. "Don't act like you forgot." I hadn't forgotten. I just hadn't expected anyone else to remember mine. He cut a generous slice and walked over, balancing it like a circus act. I shifted slightly to the left to avoid the frosting, but Torin, in true Torin fashion, flicked it at me. Not hard, more like a lopsided toss. The corner of the cake landed squarely on my keyboard, icing smearing across my wrist. The room laughed. Torin laughed. I did not. Instead, I reached for a napkin, dabbed my glasses clean, and silently removed the cake from the keys. The keyboard was still responsive. Good. No time for malfunctions. "You're too serious," he chuckled, walking off to greet the arriving investors. "It's a party, not a surgery." The frosting stayed on my sleeve until noon. 2 days earlier, they'd held a surprise birthday break in the lounge. Balloons, a cake, some awkward office singing. The cake had "Happy Birthday Torin" piped across it in bright blue lettering. Below that, in a smaller, half-hearted scrawl, "And Eliora?" Eliora, not my name. It was the name of Torin's ex-girlfriend. No one corrected it. No one noticed, except Kaya. She blinked twice, looked at me like she wanted to say something, then didn't. The only one who looked uncomfortable, and she was an intern. I sliced my piece quietly, ate it with a smile that didn't touch my eyes, and went back to debugging. The meeting at my parents' house that weekend should have been more grounding. It wasn't. The dining room had been transformed into a strategy space, complete with handouts and an espresso machine. I arrived 5 minutes late, caught in post-rain traffic. Every seat had a name tag, except mine. Torin was already mid-pitch when I stepped in, pointer in hand, pacing in front of a slide that outlined our company vision. Everyone else was seated around the table. My mother handed me a folding chair from the corner, as if she were passing me a napkin. "Sorry, sweetheart, we weren't sure you'd make it." I nodded, sat quietly, took notes, said nothing. Halfway through, Torin brought up a new automation feature, my feature, but labeled it as AI-enhanced workflow logic spearheaded by cross-functional collaboration. It was mine, built from scratch. Code I'd written while everyone else was sleeping. I should have said something, corrected the record, asserted ownership. Instead, I smiled, jotted a note to myself, highlighted a bullet point on his slide. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I booted my workstation, opened my encrypted archive labeled Nova Access Prep, and started organizing files. Source code. Original architecture drafts. Every revision I'd made. Every license clause I had quietly inserted into the back end during development, especially the one that tied primary system control to a specific user role. Mine. As I worked, I noticed the corner of my sleeve. Frosting stain. Still there. I didn't wash it off. I let it dry. The next day, I'd wear the same jacket. Let them think I didn't notice. Let them think I didn't care. Let them keep laughing. Because while they rehearsed their speeches and polished their press photos, I was laying the groundwork. They'd called me the assistant, but I'd already started writing my exit plan the moment they laughed. The magazine was already on the cafe counter when I walked in, half curled like it knew what was inside. I ordered a black coffee and picked it up without looking. My name wasn't on the cover, obviously, but Torrens was. Meet the visionary behind Ether AI. That was the headline, printed in bold just above his smirking face, a navy blazer draped too neatly over a t-shirt he hadn't earned. I didn't open the article. I didn't need to. The front told me everything. I folded it in half, tucked it under my arm, and walked out before they called my name for the drink. Back at the office, the energy buzzed around him. Someone had brought donuts. A few junior developers hovered near Torrens' desk, laughing at a joke I wasn't invited to hear. When I passed by, one of them nodded politely, like you'd nod at an admin who brought you your badge. No one mentioned the article to me. No one asked what I thought. At noon, a client called in for a walkthrough. Torren patched me in. The woman on the line said, "Oh, you must be the assistant who helped design the back end. Amazing work." I smiled through my teeth. Happy to help. After the call, Torren winked. She loved the product. Keep doing what you're doing. I walked straight to the elevator. A junior dev, Connor maybe, stepped in behind me, holding a takeout box and looking at his phone. We rode in silence until floor 3. "Hey, you're Torren's sister, right?" he said. "Didn't realize you were on the tech side. I thought you did scheduling or something." I nodded. Something like that? The elevator opened. I didn't wait for him to step out first. Back at my desk, there was a calendar invite waiting in my inbox. From Torren. Subject line, Assistant Alignment Check-in. Inside was a feedback form, a 360 review format. It asked if I felt supported in my current role, and whether I had demonstrated cross-functional collaboration. I stared at the form. Then I deleted the draft reply I'd started with too much honesty. Instead, I opened the folder labeled Clause Retention, Proof.docs. I'd written the clause quietly, months ago, buried deep in the license schema. It stated that the software, thread, must reflect the contribution of the system architect or face license void. I'd attached it to a conditional tag that recognized role shifts within the company hierarchy. At the time, it had felt excessive, a bit paranoid, but I'd kept it, just in case. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the dim light of my apartment's kitchen, laptop glowing across a cluttered table. I updated the clause, built a time release function into the backend. If a leadership tag ever removed or demoted my identifier, access would begin a quiet shutdown. Not instant, but inevitable. I encrypted the code, backed it up twice, and uploaded it to a private node hosted under Nova Logic, a name no one else in the company had access to. Then I created a note. I didn't write it for Torren. I wrote it for me. If they won't say my name, they'll remember my silence. I exhaled and finally stood, walked to the drawer near my door, pulled out the magazine I hadn't finished reading. Torren's face smiled back at me under the spotlight he didn't build. Built by heart, driven by vision. That's what the caption said. I grabbed a pen from the counter, wrote underneath, built by code, erased by ego. I folded it slowly, with care, like it might matter someday, slipped it into my drawer, next to the other contracts, the backup drive, and the printout of the original license. I wasn't the assistant. I just hadn't shown them what I really ran, yet. I pulled up to my parents' house in Bellevue, 5 minutes behind schedule. Torren's car was already in the driveway, perfectly aligned like he measured the curb. Inside, the dining room had been transformed into what Dad called the war room. A whiteboard on the wall, charts taped beside framed family photos, and a catering spread from the local brunch spot we used to visit after church. The table was full. Every seat had a placard, except one. I stood just inside the doorway for a moment, scanning for anything that looked like a simple oversight. A missing name, a card flipped over. But no. Every other chair was marked. Even Aunt Lori, who barely knew how to open PDFs, had a seat at the table. Mom glanced up. "Oh, good, Maris. We didn't know if you were coming." She said it like she was covering for me, like I was the flaky one. "I sent a confirmation email last night," I replied. "Oh." She tilted her head, already turning away. Must have missed it. A cousin, Josh, stood and dragged a folding chair in from the hallway. "Here," he said, as if solving a minor hiccup. I took it with a small thank you and set it at the end of the table, near the coffee maker, next to a half-full bottle of syrup. Torrin launched into the first slide like nothing had happened. "Team, we're talking vision today." He was dressed for a photo shoot, sleeves slightly rolled, no tie, like someone trying to look relaxed on purpose. His voice filled the room. I kept quiet, pen in hand, jotting down half the ideas I'd originally written in last month's system optimization memo. Torrin presented them as collaborative efforts and new strategic pivots. The language was slick. Almost none of it was new. At one point, he nodded in my direction and said, "And some of these insights came from support feedback, which is great. Shows how deeply everyone's aligned." Support feedback. I looked around the table. No one flinched. No one looked my way. They just nodded like he'd quoted scripture. I thought back to a school play in 6th grade. I'd built the entire backdrop, painted trees, stars, even designed the props. My name wasn't in the program. Torrin had the lead role. No one noticed I wasn't listed, and when I told my parents, Mom said, "Sweetheart, what matters is the play went well." I had believed that, for years, that being unseen was acceptable if the thing worked. Turns out, when you play that long in the background, people forget you're real. The meeting ran another 40 minutes. No one asked for my opinion. Not once. When it ended, people mingled around the table, filling their plates again, asking Torrin questions about timelines and rollout ideas. I stepped out into the hallway, retrieved my jacket from the coat rack, and left without saying goodbye. The air outside was warmer than I expected. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I still had the notepad in my hand. Instead of heading straight home, I ducked into a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio. The place smelled like vanilla and paper. I ordered a tea, sat by the window, and flipped open to the last page of notes. Beneath my scribbled diagrams, I wrote, "Next time they look for a seat with my name on it, there won't be one." I sat with that sentence for a while. It didn't sting, not like before. It felt still. I took a sip of tea just as my phone buzzed. Calendar alert. Thread internal rebrand review, led by Torrin. I smiled for the first time that day. "They can keep the table," I murmured. "I'm redrawing the map." The office was silent, except for the hum of the HVAC and the occasional creak of the floor beneath my chair. Everyone else had left hours ago. Torrin's blazer still hung on the back of his chair across the open layout, like a stand-in for presents. I didn't need it. His fingerprints were already all over what I'd just found. I had been running a final check before sending a proposal package to one of our major clients. Thread's performance projections, cross-market optimizations, my formula, my structure, my language. But when I opened the shared folder, the final PDF bore a different title page: Vision Expansion Proposal, authored by Torrin Delka. I didn't react, not visibly. My jaw didn't clench, my breath didn't catch. I simply opened a second window and pulled up my original document. Same file name, same structure. Metadata showed I had authored the first version a week ago. Torrin had simply opened it, deleted the header, and replaced it with his name. He didn't even bother to change the font. I took a screenshot, then another showing the version history, and another of the time-stamped logs. I compiled them in a folder I named Thread, Truth, Stack, and copied it to 2 encrypted drives. one to stay on my work laptop, one for the NovaLogic private archive. It wasn't rage I felt, it was a click, like something I'd already known finally sliding into place. I was still organizing the evidence when a notification from our media server popped up. A file transfer, raw footage from our recent promotional shoot. It had come from the new video intern. Wrong inbox. I clicked out of habit. Inside were uncut takes, multiple angles of Torin rehearsing, posing, gesturing in front of my dashboards. The final cut, I remembered, had no voiceover from me. I hadn't thought much of it, until I opened a behind-the-scenes mic feed. I heard his voice. "She looks too studenty on camera. Just cut her. Keep it focused on the male founder. It's cleaner, sells better." A beat. Then someone off-camera laughed. I paused the playback, rewound, played it again. There it was. Confirmed. Intentional. Efficient. Brutal. I downloaded the clip and saved it in 3 formats. Then I transcribed the quote word for word. It went in the same folder. No anger in the process, just precision. When I was done, I closed the laptop and stood in the empty office, hands on the edge of the desk. They didn't forget me. They removed me. When I got home, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat down at the kitchen counter and reopened a document I hadn't looked at in 2 months. Clause, retention, proof.docs. It was a licensing clause I had embedded into the architecture of Thread before we'd even finished the first prototype. Buried deep in the software stack, it required that any public or legal attribution of Thread's design include the name of its architect, or else the license would automatically enter review status, voidable within 14 days. A legal tripwire. I updated the clause, adjusted the condition to align with Torin's new founder-only branding campaign, and re-signed it using my digital key. Then I re-encrypted the document and uploaded the fresh version into NovaLogic's master contract archive. I went to bed not angry, but exact. By morning, I didn't say a word about what I'd discovered. Instead, I bought coffee for the intern and thanked her for sending over the raw media. She blinked, unsure what she'd done, but smiled and said, "Anytime." I told her she'd be getting a project lead soon. She didn't know what that meant yet. Then I drafted a memo to legal and HR. Just a simple 1-line subject line. Attribution review request. Per clause 4.3. Inside, I included the screenshots, the metadata, the video clip link, and the transcription. No commentary, just facts. I hit send. Watched the email disappear from my outbox. A few minutes later, I walked outside. The skies were darker than usual, clouds building overhead. Thunder rumbled in the distance, rare for a June morning in Seattle. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, just listening. "You cut me from the video," I said quietly, pulling my coat tighter. "Let's see how you cut legal consequences." The office was quiet when I arrived, just the low hum of servers and the filtered light of an overcast morning. I passed Torin's door on the way to my desk, muffled laughter leaking through the gap beneath. His voice, unmistakable, rode the tail end of a joke that someone in there found hilarious. I didn't pause, just kept walking. My laptop lit up as I settled in, the familiar interface of our project sync system flashing alive. A new Slack notification blinked in the corner. Dev Vision thread updated. I clicked it open without thinking. The first message was from Torin. "Let's stick with calling her assistant for external docs. Keeps the narrative clean." Someone responded with a GIF, one of those smug 90s sitcom characters raising a toast. Captioned, "Behind every great man." I stared at it. Not because I was surprised, but because I finally stopped pretending I could still be. I didn't reply. Instead, I took screenshots, saved the thread in a local folder, then in another, then on a USB that I labeled Paper Trail Media Threads. You'd think I was paranoid, but paranoia is just strategy with receipts. Later that morning, we had a media team sync. Torin led it, of course. He was in rare form, buttoned up but breezy, like a politician halfway into a campaign. He announced our upcoming press tour, calling it The Future of Marketing, Powered by One Vision. One Vision. He turned to me and smiled that camera-trained smile. And with the help of our brilliant lead system liaison, everything's running smoother than ever. Liaison, not engineer, not founder, not architect. I nodded. Quiet. Not frozen, just focused. While Torin fielded questions, I updated a file on my desktop. A simple Excel sheet with 2 tabs, misattributions, and timeline evidence. Every time I got renamed, cropped, or recategorized, I logged it. After the meeting, I returned to my desk. Everyone filtered back to their corners. I sat down and found something stuck to my keyboard. A yellow sticky note, slightly bent at the corner. Thank you for building it. I see you. Kaya. I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't even neat handwriting, but it was the first thing in weeks that cracked something open inside me. I didn't cry, but I blinked harder than necessary before tucking the note into the drawer where I kept my passcode notebook and backup drive, right next to the NovaLogic folder. That afternoon, I rewrote the licensing protocol. This time, I added a clause specifically addressing misattribution. If marketing collateral continued to omit correct attribution, a key module in the thread framework would begin self-limiting access to core adaptive data. Not instantly, just enough to cause questions. I labeled the new zip archive. Final phase, soft break, ready.zip. Then I encrypted it, timestamped it, and uploaded a backup to NovaLogic's offsite server, tagged under my private key. The office grew louder as the day went on. Torin moved from desk to desk, checking in, handing out compliments like mints. When he finally reached my desk, he leaned casually on the divider. Big day tomorrow, he said. You ready, champ? I looked up at him, steady. I'm more ready than you think. He smirked, oblivious, and moved on. Behind him, the office hummed. Deadlines, emails, the sound of keys clicking. Everything appeared normal, but I knew better, because I wasn't waiting to be handed a title anymore. They gave me a label I never asked for. Now I was ready to show them what I never said out loud. The pitch week felt more like a pageant than a professional milestone. Everywhere I turned, someone was measuring distances between banners, adjusting the lighting for photos, or practicing elevator lines Torin had probably ghostwritten himself. He strutted through the office like he'd already closed the round. When he dropped the printed pitch deck on my desk, I didn't expect gratitude. I expected accuracy. It wasn't there. No credit line, no contributor page, no architect notation. Just the Ether AI logo in glossy emboss, and Torin's name under Founder and Vision Strategist. You'll be behind the screen, right? He asked, without even making eye contact. You always run the slides so smooth. I gave a small nod and turned the deck over. Not in agreement, just to avoid looking at it again. That night, the office cleared early. Torin had reservations downtown with potential investors. I stayed back, telling the junior devs I'd double-check the licensing backup. That part wasn't a lie. I pulled up the company's internal legal repository, searched for ownership, founder, patent. One by one, the filings loaded, and my name was gone. Removed from patent credits, absent from architecture certification, replaced under internal consolidation, signed off by Torin and 2 legal advisors I hadn't spoken to since onboarding. I reached into the filing cabinet beside my desk and pulled out the envelope I'd sealed 6 months prior. Paper copies of every contract I'd signed, scanned, backed up, notarized. I knew then what had happened wasn't just ego, it was structural, intentional. I didn't cry. I printed 2 copies of the new discrepancy list, marked them with the date, and tucked them into the NovaLogic evidence file under Foundation Theft. 2 nights before the pitch, the system broke. Not a small glitch, not a loading delay, a full back-end crash. I was already at home, sipping tea and writing notes on a scratch pad, when the first panicked messages came in. Thread's central logic server had entered recursive lag. refusing commands, and freezing adaptive tasks mid-process. The dashboards went dark. Torin called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Then he texted, "System crash. It has no clue. Fix this, please." I didn't respond, but I logged into the Nova Logic console, traced the corrupted line in the code, an issue introduced weeks ago in a reckless update, and patched it manually. No one knew it was me. The next morning, a mass email from Torin's account hit the office inbox. "Big thanks to our incredible ops team for resolving last night's server hiccup. Couldn't have done it without the Dream Crew." Attached was a photo. Torin shaking hands with the lead investor, smiling like a man who had wrestled tech back from the brink. In the background of the image, my desk was visible, empty, light still on. Routine betrayal feels less like betrayal over time and more like background noise. So I worked in silence. That afternoon, I opened the back-end code for Thread. Quietly, I embedded a failsafe, a dynamic expiry trigger, tied not to a time, but to a role. Mine. If the system detected my administrative status dropped or revoked, a cascade would begin. Data restricts, algorithm locks, memory wipes staged over 12 hours. I encrypted the command under Nova Logic credentials and linked it to my biometric key. Then I ran a diagnostic. A minute later, the internal alert came through. Thread system dependency, 94% tied to user. MVen. Current role, operational, active. I leaned back in my chair, watching the code blink softly. "You removed my name from the paper," I said aloud, "but not from the pulse." The rooftop sparkled in carefully curated perfection. String lights woven through modern pergolas, a jazz trio playing in the corner, like they'd been hired to make wealth feel casual. Every corner was Instagram ready, but the only camera I noticed was the one on the projector, slowly cycling through a slide deck that looked vaguely familiar. Thread 2.0, launch celebration, Seattle skyline in the background, vision slides on loop. I stood by the service bar, my badge clipped discreetly inside my jacket. Not because I was hiding, but because I already knew it wasn't going to be called. The first slide. One vision, one voice. Torin. He stepped up to the mic, grinning like a man about to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award. I had to hand it to him. He worked a room better than most people worked a keyboard. "And tonight," he said, his voice smooth over the clink of flutes and the gentle bass line behind him, "we celebrate a platform that's already changing the future of marketing." I watched from the edge as my dashboards flashed behind him. Models I'd written, logic trees I'd spent 6 months refining. "None of this would be possible," Torin said, pausing dramatically, "without our amazing assistant and support staff." A smattering of applause. Not one head turned toward me. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe heavy. I just sipped my water and kept watching. Later, I made a slow loop of the space. Along the walls, oversized prints celebrated Thread's journey. In one, Torin stood center stage at last quarter's expo. Another showed him shaking hands with a city official. And in the back, a narrow frame held a cropped image from an earlier demo. My code behind him. My arm barely visible on the edge of the photo. They'd cut the image right before it reached my name badge. I paused in front of it, tilted my head. The lighting made me look like a shadow, which, I supposed, had been the goal all along. During Q&A, I returned to the main floor, standing just off stage as investors lined up with carefully crafted questions. One of them, a woman with a silver bob and a navy pantsuit, raised her hand. "Could you elaborate on how Thread's adaptive model handles divergent consumer behavior in split testing across regional profiles?" Torin smiled, opened his mouth, and froze. I watched his eyes dart toward the edge of the platform, toward me. I stepped forward, leaned slightly toward the mic. "That's not my area," I said evenly. "I'm just the assistant, remember?" The silence wasn't immediate. It rippled. A laugh caught in someone's throat. Then nothing. And then, the murmurs. The woman who'd asked the question didn't laugh. She simply nodded. 5 minutes later, she found me near the caterer's cart and slipped me a card. Said nothing, just handed it over. An hour after that, I overheard one of the junior investors tell his assistant to cancel a follow-up meeting with Torin next week. Torin, of course, tried to recover. "We're all one team here," he said to the crowd, voice thinner now. "Collaborative from day one." Nobody clapped. I didn't need them to. The message was already out. As the crowd began thinning, I drifted toward the exit. I didn't need to wait for the final toast or the flash photo with the downtown skyline. Inside the rideshare, the city glowed behind us. I pulled out my laptop, connected to the secure Nova Logic network, and entered my key phrase. Execute. License contingency. The screen blinked once. Then a timer appeared. Thread systems. 9 hours, 44 minutes until license deactivation. I closed the lid. "Enjoy your lights, Torin," I whispered. "They go out at sunrise." At 6:42 a.m., I was already dressed. Not in the support blazer they'd handed me the night before, folded neatly inside a branded gift bag with a printed thank you note. That blazer was sitting inside my bottom drawer, next to the licensing clause I'd revised in silence over too many months. The patch on its breast pocket read, "Support Team, Making Visions Real." I hadn't flinched when I'd received it. I'd smiled, even nodded, but I never put it on. The morning light creeping through my apartment window was muted. I held my coffee steady in one hand, while the other refreshed the Nova Logic dashboard. The status bar crawled just past 92%. No texts, no calls, not yet. At exactly 7:03 a.m., Slack lit up like a pinball machine. Message after message flooded in, pinging from teams across departments. Thread dashboards were blank. Access credentials were failing. Nothing was syncing. Torin called twice. I ignored both. Then came the emails from DevOps, subject lines getting increasingly frantic. "Is this an AWS issue? Anyone hearing back from Maris? Front-end access revoked. Who did this?" By 7:30, 2 clients had found my personal email. One simply asked, "Did you know Thread's backend is locked?" Yes, I did. I took my time walking into the office. At 8:30, the place looked like a fire drill without the fire. Laptops open, people standing, everyone trying to look like they were solving something without knowing what broke. Torin was pacing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, red blotches starting to form along his neck. I didn't rush. I walked straight to the executive conference room and stepped inside without knocking. Torin followed, slamming the door behind me. "What the hell is going on? We can't access anything. The clients are—" "The system didn't crash," I said calmly, setting a flash drive on the table. "It obeyed." He blinked as if waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, he frowned. "You're saying you did this?" "I'm saying you broke the license terms. The system responded accordingly." He stared at me. The door behind us creaked open. 2 senior developers peeked in, eyes full of unspoken panic. Torin waved them off. I sat down, opened the folder in front of me, and slid a printed packet across the table. "This is my formal resignation," I said. "Effective immediately." He didn't touch the folder. "You can't be serious." "I'm not here to negotiate, Torin." He laughed once, dry. "We just had the launch party. You're going to blow it up now?" "No," I said, rising. "You already did that when you decided a support patch was good enough to carry a system." He tried to reach for the flash drive. I beat him to it. "This is mine. All of it. Nova Logic owns the framework. You had a license, which was tied to my operational status. You let marketing scrub my name. You stripped ownership from internal documentation. You voided the contract." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You handed me the blazer," I added, "but you didn't read the clause sewn into the code?" There was nothing left to say. I left the folder on the table, flash drive in hand, and walked out. The office didn't notice me at first. Heads were still down, phones still ringing. But by the time I reached the exit, someone was watching. 2 people stood near the printer, silent. They didn't say anything, just nodded as I passed. Outside, the sun had finally broken through the cloud cover. The air smelled sharp, like ozone and clarity. My phone buzzed again. 3 new messages. None from Torin. All from clients. Subject line on the most recent one. Maris, can we talk? The key stuck a little in the lock. Old wood, dry air. I had to jiggle it before the door clicked open. Inside, the new space was smaller than our last office, but infinitely lighter. There was no lobby fountain, no polished marble signage. Just the sound of a coffee grinder from the bookstore below, and the distant murmur of students shuffling toward a lecture down the block. I stepped into the front room, flicked the lights on, and inhaled deeply. It smelled like lemon cleaner and cardboard. Our desks were still mismatched. One was an old drafting table, another borrowed from a university surplus auction. But they were ours. No marketing jargon painted on the walls. No framed pictures of people who had never touched the code. That morning, I found 2 new emails. The first was from a systems engineer I'd worked with 2 years ago. She'd heard about the fallout. Wanted to join. The second came from REI. Subject line: We're ready to talk, on your terms. Later that day, Starbucks followed. Same tone, same eagerness. Their logos now lived inside NovaLogic's interface, not threads. I leaned back and looked at the logo stenciled on our glass door. It was a bit crooked, and the paint hadn't fully dried. Still, it was real, and it was mine. That afternoon, an email slid into my inbox with a familiar sender. Kaya Hollow. I left too, she wrote. They called me ungrateful. I'd rather be unseen than complicit. There was no pitch, no resume. Just the raw truth in 10 words. I replied immediately. We've got room at the table. I opened the drawer at my desk and pulled out the yellow sticky note she'd written all those weeks ago. I see you. I pressed it to the wall behind my monitor and scribbled next to it with a pen. I see you too. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind. The office was quiet except for the low hum of a server booting up in the corner. The inbox was empty, the coffee had gone cold, and I was still at my desk when the courier rang the bell. A padded envelope, no return address. But I recognized the typewriter font on the label. Torin. Inside, a single page, typed, signed. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said he never thought it would spiral the way it did. You always seemed fine. I folded the letter once and placed it into a file labeled Legal Closed. It didn't deserve a second read. The next morning, I was scheduled to speak at a tech ethics seminar. Small auditorium, mostly graduate students and first-year founders. I didn't bring slides. I brought the mug. White ceramic, hairline cracked down one side. The words still visible. Best assistant. I placed it on the podium. Didn't reference it. Didn't explain. Instead, I spoke about code and consequence. Ownership and omission. I told the story without names, just facts. Just silence in all the right places. When it ended, they clapped. Some too loudly. A few just nodded, heads down, absorbing. Back at the office that night, I shelved the mug next to our incorporation certificate. The view from the window didn't show Seattle anymore. No skyline, no rooftop launches. Just a quiet street in Austin and a bookstore below with a cat that slept in the window display. I whispered to no one in particular. Let them keep the headlines. I kept the code. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't speaking up, it's walking away. Especially when the people who silenced you are the same ones you once built your world around. But there's a strength in quiet resistance, in choosing dignity over noise, clarity over chaos. What I've learned, and what I want you to remember, is this. Recognition doesn't make your work real. Credit doesn't define your value. And silence, when chosen wisely, can be the loudest truth in the room. If you've ever been the one behind the curtain, the one who made things work while others took the applause, I see you. And you are not alone. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had your voice minimized? Your work erased? What did you do? And what would you do differently now? share your story in the comments. And if this story hit something deep inside you, drop a 1 in the chat, or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, that's okay too. Tell me why. I want to hear it all. And if you believe in stories that reflect real life, its pain, its resilience, its quiet victories, don't forget to subscribe. This is just one of many stories we'll uncover together. Until next time, take care of your story. It's worth telling.